understood why it got so much attention in the word. I think it was just the shock of hearing that word used so freely. Like, I can only think of what may have happened when Richard Pryor was using it in the 70s, where it was just so shocking to hear somebody talk about it with no conscience that it just became something that people was attracted to. Unfortunately, a lot of artists, or a lot of musicians that were not necessarily artists, would latch onto that trick and start abusing the term because they felt like if they said it, the shock value would bring popularity to them. And the misuse of it, the using it out of context and abusing it as a result to entertain, I felt definitely caused an issue. But like when I see Boys in the Hood and the way the word nigga is used in that movie, I am not offended at all. Not at all. It felt very appropriate given the circumstances that they were in at the time, dealing with what they were dealing with. But when you see other times where you could see it telegraphed, like it said, bitch or nigga or whatever it is, as a way to just get somebody to pay attention to the scene or to the art form or to the lyric that you just said, I think that's when it gets a little crazy. I think what Luke Skywalker did was a little crazy. You know, it was just a little crazy. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't have had an act, right? If he didn't put girls up there half naked and say what he said, then he would not be able to, we wouldn't even know his name, actually, right? And I think that's where the abuse came in. And then, of course, the people, the media, guys who all of a sudden had to cover this art form, whose job was to find all the flaws in it and never find anything good about it, found the big headlines. They use the word bitch and nigger so many times it's offensive. Shut it down. And unfortunately, that brought a lot of negative attention to hip-hop.
Let's turn to the economics of hip-hop. And before we get to how it really transformed, you know, how business is done in America, let's talk about battles within hip-hop economically. Why is it, help us understand why, given what you just said, that the people in hip-hop who oppose certain narrow visions of women, you know, brown-skinned lady, or, you know, arguments within hip-hop said, no, we shouldn't talk about women that way. Why is it, among other things, why is it that the hip-hop that's, quote, conscious, that might be a death no right there, conscious rap is not played on radio, whereas the other stuff that celebrated some of the more narrow visions of blackness was played relentlessly? Any thoughts about that?
You know what? It's funny. It's like, you know, sometimes when you do anything, like if you go for like the conscious rap, that doesn't give you an excuse not to have a hot beat. Like, you gotta have a hot beat too. And a lot of guys go for the conscious rap and then go for the, yo, hear every word that I'm saying, so I'm gonna make the beat not really do much. And it's like, well, we don't really like the beat, so I'm not really listening to the song. If somebody spit conscious rap over niggas in Paris, people would be dancing the same exact way. They pick beats sometimes that are a little, I mean, truth of the matter is, Kanye West started like one of those conscious rap kind of on his first college dropout album. True. And it was the beat that made him popular. So I think that that's an issue, like, but the same thing happens in R&B. Like, you know, you have the neo-soul artists. They're neo-soul artists because they stand for something, and, you know, they have a certain lane in which they write their lyrics to. But they don't have to just stay within that lane to represent what they represent. In fact, you see an artist like, I wish he put out more albums, but Maxwell, he broke out of that, right? So there's D'Angelo broke out of that. So you can actually make great music and still hold on to whether it be, you know, the conscious rapper or the neo-soul artist. In fact, I would say a lot of Nas's career, he came across as a conscious rapper, but he had hot beats and everybody loved it. And you know what, just because you're conscious does not give you the right to not be honest about what you're seeing. I mean, your job as an artist is to at least have a perspective on the community in which you grew up in, the experiences that you had, and share them. And if everything you have to share is coming from a place of conscious rap and this, that, and the third, and the world is beautiful, and don't do this, and we're going back to Africa, unfortunately, that's not necessarily true for everybody, and you got to have many different layers of conversation in order for people to ride with you.
Right. Well, I'm sure that'll be a source of a lot of engaged conversation. No, I'm saying that's good. So, because I often joke that, a lot of people say, well, I got converted.
They wanted to see us so bad, they came a half hour late.
So when people say, they get converted and now they're singing for the Lord or something, and then you say, well, why does the devil get all the great beats? Because now he's singing for the Lord, it's kind of whack. So it would be interesting to see that parallel. Well, the point on it, which is what you were saying, the point on economics is interesting because your book helps us understand how a culture was able to leverage its rhetorical and lyrical appeal. It's a great art form. It has great ideas and some great beats linked to those ideas. But speak to us about, should we be worried about, concerned about, or involved with the discussion of who owns hip-hop? One of the big arguments has been, well, it ain't really black people, y'all making music, but it's the white record executives who really own that, so on and so forth. Help us understand.
I was actually, when I was writing the book, I was in a club one night, and it was a club in New York on Monday night, and it was hip-hop music playing wall to wall. And it was 90% white people dancing to it. And I was thinking to name the book, The Tanning of America, How We Invented It and Gave It All Away. I was like, I can't do that. That's just crazy. Art is to be shared. I know how we all feel. African Americans without it. There's no asterisk next to it. There's no, do you remember? We clearly created this thing. Why can it even be confused that we own it? But, with distribution, now we're talking straight business. When you talk about distribution and you're talking about media, you're talking about predominantly white people, predominantly Jewish people. They own them. So you have to have partners in those areas of business in order to create the popularity of the art form. Now you had BET and Bob Johnson created a platform, and that was great. But you got to keep pushing in to get it wider and wider, wider and wider. You're going to have to deal with more white people. So you can't say, and they have to be a partner in it. So that's the reason why that confusion comes in, like who really owns it now, and the record executives are white. But you know what, man? I really believe that we got to give a lot of credit to the guys who didn't give it all away, and you got to give it up to Puffy and what he did, and Jay-Z and what he did, and Russell Simmons and Master P and Cash Money. I mean, these guys really decided, they got into a point where they said, you know what? I'm going to own a lion's share of it as a result of the fact that it's that popular and you can't do without it. So we have made a lot of gains in equity ownership of the content and the art form that we create. And then we also extended it with the clothing lines and selling other products that extend off of the art form itself. And for me, I came up in hip-hop in the early 90s, and I managed Kid and Play, and then went on to manage Nas and then marry J. Blige, and produce records for a lot of the big artists that you guys know of. And for me to go into the advertising business, that's a step in the right direction, right? So you got guys owning their clothing lines, owning their record companies, and now you have a guy who comes from that generation who can actually help change some of the images on television and help change the commercialism of the art form through media and advertising. I feel like these are all things. It's not over. It's by far over. People said, Pac-Man. Remember the game Pac-Man? was Pac-Man Main Street.